The views and opinions expressed by the following program are those of the host, guests, and callers and are not necessarily those of this station or Webster Rock Hill Ministries, its management, or other hosts or underwriting sponsors. Programs presented by KWRH-LP are for educational and entertainment purposes only.
Welcome back to In Tune. This is Arnold Stricker, and now with...
I'm Ellie Wharton. This next guest I could not believe this next guest and who he is. It's like, did you plan either the guest first and then the bad weather, or the bad weather and then you called the guest?
No, I was... I kind of really prayed about this one, so...
Wait a second.
Arranged to have, when I knew he was going to be here, it's like working out some kind of weather situation.
Some rain thing, huh? Where we'd have to go get our ark.
Yeah, Mark Diedrich, who's director of the, and you correct me if I'm wrong, director of the St. Louis County Office of Emergency Management, is here in studio. Welcome, Mark, to In Tune.
Thank you, Arnold.
And me and Mark and I, we had long, like we bonded while we were waiting.
Okay.
So... he knows who I am. I already know who he is.
Okay, very good.
So...
And Mark has probably one of the most important responsibilities. I'm not saying jobs, responsibilities.
Yeah.
Because it's a tremendous one. And I'm going to let him describe it, but I want to tease the listeners a little bit that if there's a situation, an emergency that occurs within the confines of St. Louis County, or if there's a disaster, or if a natural or some kind of other disaster, or if there's a terrorist kind of incident, those kinds of incidents, Mark is the one who is going to be directing the office. And there's a lot of things that go into how you deal with these situations, how you prepare for them, how you, initiate response after them. So we're going to get into that. But first, tell us a little bit about who you are and how you came into this position.
Well, sure, absolutely. But before I do that, I just want to say that if you did have anything about bringing the weather in this weekend, you may not get me back on the air again.
I was just kidding on him.
I know you were. And I'd really rather avoid it, but unfortunately or fortunately in my job, that's what we deal with. So we are prepared for that. A little bit about myself, born and raised in St. Louis. Spent, again, all my life here, and started with the St. Louis County Police Department in 1992 as a police dispatcher. And then in 1998, a position opened up in the Office of Emergency Management. I interviewed for it, got it, and I've worked my way up in the office there for the past 20 years till I became director, actually 4 years ago this month.
Wow, congratulations.
Well, thank you.
You really know the ins and outs then of the office if you've worked your way all the way up.
Absolutely. And I think that's very important. It's kind of a funny story. A gentleman who I started with in the Office of Emergency Management, he asked me once, a few years ago, about when did you really understand what we were doing here? And I said, to be really honest with you, it took me about 6 or 7 years to completely understand what our role was. And his response was, I'm glad you said that, because if you said anything less than that, I would have said you were lying. and the reason I think that's important is because when you're dealing with disasters, you may have a flood and you work that disaster and it finishes and you move on and you start to think to yourself, okay, I've got it now. I know what I'm doing. And then 3 months later, you may have a tornado and you work through that and you think, boy, everything I thought I knew, I just learned more. And every time there's a new disaster, there's something new to learn. And I kind of have a saying that all disasters are the same and all disasters are different. And what I mean by that is there are certain things that you have to focus on, shelter for people, rescuing people, those sorts of things. But how it happened and exactly how you need to go about doing those things is all just a little bit different with each disaster. So it's a learning process.
And I'm glad to hear that you said a learning process, because if you're not evaluating how you've approached or after a disaster has occurred and you're not evaluating all the things that go into responding, you're not learning anything.
No, absolutely. And that's almost a mantra of mine. Every time we have some sort of an activation, whatever it is, whether it's a planned event or a disaster, one of the first things I say to my staff is, we did a great job. Now, how can we do it better? And we're constantly looking at what we do, how we do it, and looking to improve that. Because I don't think you can ever achieve perfection, but you certainly can strive towards that.
Yeah, so we're talking about things, folks at home, we're talking about like what is the county emergency operations plan? Radio communications, severe weather warnings. Like we heard the other day, the tornado warning sirens going off, and then you hear.
That's right. But the thing is that all they have to do is be listening to KWRH-LP, because we have the EAS system, the early alert system, and our station broadcast any emergency broadcast that comes across.
So
it's automatic.
If something even happens during our interview.
That's right.
It will
break in. That's right. We will be interrupted. It'll break in, and we will not be in control of the station until the announcement has been completed.
So, Mark, talk about the kinds of things that you deal with. I know you mentioned natural disasters, and there's fires. It could be an earthquake. Years ago there was the Ivan Browning thing. Oh yeah, New Madrid Fault's going to go, and everybody needs to be prepared for that. But what are the situations that you have helped manage and oversee the plans for St. Louis County in case something happens?
Well, our basic plan is based, you mentioned the earthquake, or the earthquake threat, I should say. Our basic plan is based on that earthquake threat. And the reason for that is that's our worst case scenario. So if we can build a plan to deal with that, then everything else, I hate to say would be easy, but it would be less difficult than dealing with an earthquake. So that's where we start. Even though that is our greatest threat or our greatest hazard, we probably in this area, especially in Missouri and even in this area, flooding is more of an issue than anything else. And what we're looking at this weekend is the possibility of flash flooding, which quite honestly is the threat that keeps me up the most at night. And the reason for that is because the word flash. It happens very quickly, it goes away very quickly, and it's very difficult to respond to. I can't right now tell you where the flash flooding is going to occur in the St. Louis County area this weekend. I'm sure we're going to have some, but I can't tell you where it is. That makes it very difficult to respond to. Fortunately, we have a tremendous group of first responders, police and firefighters, who are prepared, who are ready. I was just on a conference call this morning with many of them, getting everything situated, getting things staged so that if and when that flash flood occurs, they're going to be able to respond to it and rescue people, and hopefully we won't have any injuries or any fatalities.
Because your plans take into account the hospitals in the area. They take into account all of the law enforcement municipalities, the fire department districts, all on the same plan because they have to be, because they may have to help one another or move many services into one general area.
Absolutely. That's one of the difficulties that we deal with here in St. Louis County. When I go around the country and talk with other emergency managers or have them come here for whatever reason, one of the things that they're astounded by is the makeup of our governmental system in St. Louis County. 88 municipalities, over 50 police departments, 43 fire districts. That's very, on the surface, that's a very difficult thing to manage. But I'm proud to say, and this really has more to do with the people who are in those roles than myself, when a disaster strikes, everybody works together and everybody has a common goal, and they know that they need to talk to their neighboring jurisdiction. If they need help, they'll come and help them, and vice versa. It goes both ways. So
would you guys deal with things like, and I'm just going to name some things, like an aircraft crash?
Absolutely.
Okay. We had previously talked about the radioactive situation out at the
Bridgeton landfill.
Right.
I'm very familiar with it.
Yeah, you guys are probably losing sleep over that one for a while, and maybe still are, because that's like a time bomb ticking there in some respects.
It's we try not to refer to it as a ticking time bomb.
Yeah, I was going to say.
I'm sorry.
That was a little drastic there.
Well, and take that one back.
Roll back the time.
No, I understand what you're saying, and the point you're trying to make is there is the possibility that at some point something could happen there.
Right.
The reason I try to avoid the ticking time bomb phrase is because it's not going to explode like a bomb,
Right.
If something were to happen there. However, there's the possibility of radiation being released if that fire reaches the surface. And that is a great concern. I work with that daily. Fortunately, I have a very good relationship with the chief of the hazmat team, which is a gentleman who's assistant chief at Pattonville Fire, Matt Levanchi.
Yeah, I'm familiar with Matt.
Yeah, and Matt and I, I'm the chairman of the LEPC, which is the Local Emergency Planning Committee, and he's the vice chairman. So we talk regularly, not only at our meetings, but just about probably once or twice a week. And it unfortunately now centers around the landfill more often than not.
Wow. Okay.
So you could have things like a tornado, which we have a lot of here, a severe thunderstorm, which blows through like maybe straight line winds, which does a lot of destructive damage also.
Especially in a community like this with so many trees.
Right.
Absolutely, especially the mature trees that you have here. They can do a lot of damage.
A lot
if
of
they're brought
damage.
down.
That's right. And you know what's interesting too when we talk about the flash flooding, it's so almost sometimes by municipality, because I can remember one day coming down Olive in U City. It was storming so badly that even with my windshield wipers on extra high, and then me getting out there, and like scraping it off, I couldn't even hardly see. I get to 170 and start heading down here to Webster. By the time I got to Ladue Road, it was dry as a bone.
Right.
And so it's almost like, how do you guys plan when you're looking at a situation where you may be sunny and bright and dry as a bone, and you're hearing that maybe 15 minutes away, there's a flash flood getting ready to occur?
Well, I'll tell you a real good example of that, and I think something that can relate, or your listeners can relate to, is just recently we had the PGA Championship here
right.
at Bell Reef Country Club, and my office did all the planning for that event. And we had an issue on that Friday where a thunderstorm was coming through. And actually, I tell people it's kind of interesting because if it had been any other Friday and I was looking at the radar, to be quite honest with you, it would not have even registered with me. It would have been one of those, okay, yeah, there's a storm coming through, but not a big deal. Well, the thunderstorm cell just happened to be centered right over Bell Reef Country Club.
Oh, my.
And we were working on trying to get folks out of there to safety. It was, let me back up, the thunderstorm was coming towards there, but it was still bright and sunny at the country club. And so just as you're saying, people are saying, I don't need to leave. It's, it's sunny. It's beautiful. Actually, it's kind of cooled off now, and I'm kind of enjoying this.
There's a little breeze coming in.
Right, exactly. But there were lightning strikes all around, and we could not get people to leave. We had a large number of people who literally stayed on the metal bleachers and refused to leave as the thunderstorm was passing through.
That or they would retreat to under trees.
And there were several under trees also. Yes.
That is, well, and I just remembered reading this week, I guess if you had been in Japan, you probably would have never slept this week, because Japan had a typhoon, earthquake, landslides. I mean, they just had all kinds of stuff happen to them this week. When you start to think about those multiple disasters coming in at one time, how do you prepare your people to really deal with all of that? I mean, because, if we had a tornado, an earthquake, and a landslide and a flash flood all at one time.
That's an excellent question. And the answer to that is what I said a few moments ago. All disasters are the same. All disasters are different. You can't worry about, as an emergency manager, you can't worry once it's happened, why what has happened. What caused it? Was it a tornado? Was it a flood? Doesn't matter. You need to respond to what the needs are, and you need to start prioritizing what the needs are. The most important thing an emergency manager can do is remain calm. That's what we like to say, is that we're the calm in the midst of the storm, because we have to get from where we are now back to where we were before that storm. And you can't do that if you're running around like a chicken with your head cut off, worried about, this happened and this happened and this happened. You need to focus on the things that you need to do. And first and foremost, that's life safety, to make sure that people have a secure place to sleep that night, food in their belly, and some comfort or some hope that things are going to get better.
You're listening to Mark Diedrich, who's the director of the Office of Emergency Management for St. Louis County, and you're listening to In Tune with Arnold Stricker and Ellie Wharton. And Mark, you have a very calm demeanor, which I think assists in maybe the planning or the execution of the the plans that you have. I know there's like 4 steps, 4 phases of emergency management. There's a mitigation, a preparedness, then you have a response, which we've talked a lot about, and recovery, which we've also talked about. Can you kind of highlight a little bit of each one of those, especially the first couple ones like mitigation and preparedness?
Sure, absolutely. Mitigation comes in several forms. If we're talking about floods, it can be things like flood walls or levees, those sorts of things. Earthquake preparedness, and this is something that your listeners could do, is to make sure that things like bookcases are mounted against the wall or bolted to a wall so that they don't fall over. That's actually, in an earthquake, that's actually how people get hurt. Quite often you see it in movies and it looks like the earth opens up and people get swallowed up by the earth. That's Hollywood dramatization. In reality, it's buildings or furniture falling over on top of people. So things such as that, or mounting your hot water heater so that it doesn't fall over, so that you have water after the earthquake has passed through, because you're probably going to have the line to your house is a good chance is going to be cut off, and that hot water heater could at least supply you with some water for a few days until services get restored.
Better than the toilet tank.
Yes, that would be
that would be second choice after we've finished
it's still
with the
clean water.
That's right, exactly.
It's still clean water, but
it's my mind says
exactly.
Yeah, so getting that hot water heater strap to make sure that it's secured.
Exactly.
And I'm going down here having an alert radio to be able to pick up the alerts that come out.
Weather alert radio is very, very important. You talked about the EAS system, which is also important. And I also, you mentioned the tornado sirens a little while ago. I want to touch on that also. It's very important. We always like to say this whenever we're talking to anybody about preparedness, is weather outdoor warning system is exactly that. It's an outdoor warning system. It's not meant to be heard inside. People quite often call our office to complain about that. I didn't hear the sirens going off at 2 o'clock in the morning, and our response is usually, that's a good thing. If you were sound asleep in your bedroom, we don't want them loud enough to wake you up, because if anybody is outside at that time, their ears are going to start bleeding. It's going to be so loud. But a weather radio is going to automatically go off, and that will wake you up, I guarantee it, and you're going to know what's going on. What we tell people, when you hear that outdoor warning system, you need to go inside, go downstairs if you have a basement, and turn on a radio, turn on a TV, and find out what's going on so that you know what you need to do. It may be that the path of the storm is not going to come through your area, and that's fine. It may be that it is, but we'd rather you be inside, get that information, and then do whatever actions you need to make.
And I want to emphasize, Ellie, what he said about radios, because many times you lose electricity, your television's not going to work, or if a cell tower gets knocked over, your phone's not going to work, or the lines are jammed or whatever. Having that radio is extremely important. A battery operated one, if I can talk clearly, but it's been plugged in. It's battery backup. So you always make sure you have some kind of communication as to find out what's going on or what the plan is or how things are going.
Absolutely. That's probably one of the biggest complaints that we get from citizens is that, you sounded the sirens, but it was sunny here where I am. There's no problem. Why did you sound the sirens? Again, that siren is just telling you to go get information. Go in, turn that radio on, and find out. And if it's not coming in your area, again, great. Go on about your day. Don't worry about it. But I have a policy, and I will continue this policy, that I will sound every siren in our system throughout the entire county, regardless of where the storm is going. And the reason for that is I want people to have as much information as they can have about a storm before it gets here. And we're a very transient society. Some people live in far South County and work maybe in downtown St. Louis, or work in North County, or vice versa. And people are going to be moving around throughout the county. And if we don't give them some sort of a warning that they may be driving into an area, or maybe they have family members there, that's our responsibility to make sure you have that information. So I understand it might be inconvenient when people hear the sirens and they have to go inside, and it's not going to affect them. But to me, 30 seconds, 1 minute out of your life or out of your day is much better than losing your life or being injured or losing your home.
And when you do have some kind of disaster, you have a mobile command center that can be on site or get close by, so you can get some eyes on and have some local kind of local being like right there kind of coordination of what's going on.
Absolutely, we do. We also use social media for that. Everybody, everybody in quotes, has a smartphone. But the majority of people have a smartphone, and the majority of people are going to post things on their social media. When a storm comes through, we actually use that information to find out where the storm has hit the worst. We obviously vet that information before we start sending responders, because we don't want to send people someplace where they're not needed. But that's a huge way for us to get eyes and ears on it before we can get our mobile command center there.
And you know, it reminds me of when I first moved to Birmingham, Alabama. Wouldn't you know, like I had just moved there, had never, ever, ever lived in the South like that. And we had this horrendous tornado coming. And this was back in 1998. That's what it was. And I'm watching the TV, and we had this meteorologist who was known for sensationalism. And it's pitch black. I mean, it is a terrible storm out there. We know there's a tornado coming. And he's circling this little area on his map, you know, and he's saying to us, and if you live in this area, and he's like circling it, and then he hollers, run! We all start running, you know. We didn't know where we were running to. But he frightened the entire region. And actually where the tornado hit was probably about half an hour away. But he had the entire region just absolutely frantic. So I can certainly see the value of having someone like you and the emergency responders who are calm, who are providing accurate information, especially to meteorologists on the, you know, because there are things as ratings.
Absolutely.
Okay? And what we really need to know is the truth as to where is it going to hit, how quickly should I get my family to safety. But we should have also prepared ahead of time as to where we're going to go.
Absolutely. And I will say just real quick that the meteorologists, the TV meteorologists in our market here are very good. And they want to get the information out. I've talked to all of them individually, and they work very closely with us, and they do not want to be sensational.
Good. That's excellent.
Well, this is Arnold Stricker and Ellie Wharton of In Tune. You're listening to KWRHLP 92.9 FM, your community radio station in Webster Groves, Missouri. Stay tuned for what you can do to prepare for emergencies. Welcome back to In Tune. This is Arnold Stricker with Ellie Wharton. We have Mark Diedrich from the Office of Emergency Management. He's the director of the St. Louis County office. And if you have a question for Mark, it's 314-736-4510. You can text that to our number, 314-736-4510. And we're going to get into what you can do now as a homeowner or as an individual or a family or maybe as a business, things that to be prepared for some hazards. And we're talking like about earthquakes, extreme heat, fires, floods, hazardous materials, household chemical emergencies, lightning and thunderstorms, a public health emergency, severe winter weather, ice storms, terrorism, and tornadoes. That kind of covers it, doesn't it, Mark?
Yeah, it does. If you're going down the list, I'm not feeling too safe.
Wait. Do we have, though, attack by the African bee?
We do not. You're taking me back to my childhood.
That's
though.
right.
I remember
exactly.
fearing
remember that
immensely as a child.
That's right. The attack. And then you also remember that a nuclear attack, too. Remember that where we have to get underneath our desk and cover our heads?
I remember that.
And I always said, you know why we did that? So that when the rescuers came along later on, they could say, okay, this was Ellie right here.
That's right. This was Ellie's desk. So this must be Ellie.
Must be Ellie underneath there.
Those civil defense shelters that had the civil defense marker outside buildings to know that it was either it was a nuclear shelter, an air raid shelter to go to. Now, that dates us.
Yes, it does.
But we practiced those drills.
Oh, we did. We were that fire drills. I remember the fire drills in schools, tornado drills, all of those drills. We were drilled, man, like
now
we were
earthquake.
ready. And
They were, and I'll tell you, when you talk about fire drills, the last time in this country a child died in a school fire was 1958.
Wow.
And that is a testament to how important those drills are and how schools do them twice a year. And it's been that long since we've actually had a child lost in a school fire.
And it's interesting you say that, because something I think families do not maybe do are family fire drills or family tornado drills, things like that. Is that something you agree with, or?
No, absolutely. People should be doing that. That's part of preparedness, is you need to know what to do before it happens. And, using the school fire drills as an example, if you go to any school when they're having a fire drill, and I've gone to several over the years, the kids do what they need to do. And part of the reason they do what they need to do is because they're getting out of class for a little while, so they enjoy that. But they also, they're grumbling. It's another fire drill that we have to go through. And you kind of even see some teachers, it's just another fire drill. It's messing with my plan or what I had for the day. But the fact of the matter is, they go through those. They know exactly what they need to do. And when that fire alarm sounds and it's real, they do what they need to do. You can't expect anybody to do a plan, especially in a high-stress situation, unless they've practiced it.
And that's a great point, because I know when I go to a movie theater or I go to a doctor's appointment or I'm going into some foreign building, one of the first things I look for are the exits, because I'm now in a foreign environment where I don't know where the exits are, but I need to acquaint myself. On airplanes, they tell you, the exits are here, the exits are there, and, you're going to have lights and all this other kind of stuff. But when you go to even like a shopping center, or, you're at Galleria, or you're some large establishment, how do you get out of the place if something happens? That's really important.
It is, and I'll add even one to that. When you're in a hotel,
yes,
think about those things, and that's probably the most difficult. It's kind of easy. You're at a shopping center, you're walking through, you can kind of see it. I'm not saying you have it on your mind, but it may register. When you're in a hotel, generally you're on vacation. You're there to have a good time. The last thing you're thinking about is something going wrong where you're going to have to evacuate that building. So I just always encourage people on that first day when you check into the hotel, talk to the hotel staff. One of the things to ask is, especially if it's during the spring when we most likely have a tornado, is what is the siren system here? Not every county has the same policy that we do. Some of them sound it for high winds. Some of them only sound it when the tornado's been spotted. So you want to know that before you go in. Not trying to ruin your vacation, just make sure that you know what you need to do if and when that needs to happen.
Yeah, and preparing for these things, the personal preparedness, what your personal preparedness equipment is that you should have for yourself and your family. And as I was preparing for this show, there's an excellent app that you guys have put out that where a family or an individual can make a plan on their phone. The information stays on the phone or stays on the iPad or the other device that you're using. You put in emergency contacts, and you can press a button and you send an email or a text out to them where the closest evac shelters are, or police. Where's the closest police department to you? Fire department. It's an excellent thing, Mark. Whoever put this together really had a lot of thought into it, and it's extremely useful.
So you went on the App Store, right?
Correct.
And then you typed in, what did you type in?
Should be St. Louis County Prepares.
St. Louis County. See, I'm doing this right as we're speaking, okay? Just to show our audience how really, really easy this is.
It also has some tools. It has an alarm, an SOS alarm, which I turn my... There it is there. And it also has a flashlight, has an SOS beacon on it. So it, dit, 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 dash, 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 dit, dit, dit. Those kinds of things. A lot of interesting things. You can have some push notifications, GPS location on there, but it gives you alerts. It gives you some maps and tells you where some services are located. So how can a family or an individual prepare for any kind of event that's going on?
Well, I think, and thank you for the kind words you said about the app, because we're very proud of that. And I think that's one place you can start. We tell people that what you need to do is create a plan to start with. And when you tell people to create a plan, I get it. That sounds very overwhelming. You start getting ideas of binders and all types of things like that. And that puts people off. Nobody wants to do that. And trust me, I don't want to do that either. But with this app, you can very easily create a plan by simply answering questions. It'll ask you, how many people are in your family? And you answer that. And now the app will tell you how much food they're going to need, how much water they're going to need, all those types of things. And then it will ask you who is an out-of-town contact that you would want to get a hold of in the event of a disaster. And the reason we suggest you have an out-of-town contact is because quite often the phone lines, the local phone lines will be down, but you'll be able to get out of the local area and make a long-distance call. It's also good because generally you can make the assumption that if you have an aunt that lives in Denver, they are probably not going to be affected by whatever the disaster is here. So everybody knows they call Aunt Marcy in Denver. Aunt Marcy says, okay, Mark, whoever else in your family has already called, they're okay. Now we start to know where people are and if they're okay. We also have on that app, as you mentioned, that you can push a button and let people know. It'll automatically send out an email or a text that says, hey, I'm okay. And the reason for that is, let's say that earthquake does happen here, and Aunt Marcy is in Denver and she sees there's an earthquake, the New Madrid Fault, knowing that my family is here. Now she gets a message from all of us saying, hey, we're okay, and she can sleep a little easier that night.
Okay, you've got Make My Plan, so you push in the number of adults and children. Mm-hmm. Even if someone in your household have special needs, it also goes into, do you have any pets? And select a pet buddy, and you have a text messaging phone situation. Choose an emergency meeting place, and a phone number is optional. Who are you going to notify, as Mark was saying? And then what is the status? You can add contacts, and you generate your plan. It's very fluid. It's very simple to use, but it is a great source, and it's a lot of, I would think, not a lot of power like
muscle power
or anything like that, but it puts things in a very concise manner. Like you said, it's not a big notebook or stuff like that.
You don't need that. You really need to keep it as simple as possible.
And that's St. Louis County Prepare?
St. Louis County Prepares.
Prepares,
yes.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And the second step in being prepared is to put a kit together. And what a kit is, food, water, maybe some clothing, depending on where you're putting this kit. And I suggest 3 kits for everybody. I suggest a kit at home, and that should be your biggest kit. I suggest a kit for your car, because you never know when you might be traveling somewhere and have the disaster hit. And that's when we kind of normally think about winter weather, being in the car and getting stuck. So you'd want to put some winter weather clothing in there. You should also, just as an aside, change up these kits once in a while, put fresh things in there, maybe change the clothes, put summer clothes in for the summertime, obviously. And the third kit should be in your office, wherever you work, because you never know when it's going to happen. And I'm going to touch on the part that I think is always difficult whenever I talk to people, is the fact that as parents, we often think, if a disaster strikes, my kids are going to be with me and I'm going to be able to take care of them. The fact of the matter is, if you just take a moment, well, let's just use right now as an example. Is your family
all
right together right now? No, most likely everybody's spread. Mom and dad may be at work, kids are at school, kids may be at different schools, depending on their age.
That's right.
You may have older kids who are away at college. So everybody's not going to be together. So everybody needs to know what your plan is. Everybody needs to be part of that plan. If you have the app, needs to have a copy of that on their phone, so they know who the out-of-town contact is, so they know where you're going to meet. If for some reason you can't get to your home, where are you going to meet, so that we know that everybody's okay.
I like that share my status part, because you're right. If you've got family all over the country, children everywhere, that could be the worst time because you don't know what's happening to your family members. But by having share my status, everybody can get on there and text each other, we're safe, or we really need help, or, all
and
kinds of things.
here's a really good example that anybody who was alive for 9/11 can understand. I ask people when I'm speaking to groups, I ask them this question quite often. On 9/11, 2001, were you in New York City or in Pennsylvania where the other plane went down? Most people in this area answer no. When you heard that happened, what was the first thing you wanted to do?
Call your loved one.
Absolutely. You wanted to make sure even though you knew they weren't there, it was just the impact of what had happened hit you so hard. You wanted to make sure that your family was okay. A little personal note on mine is my father died 2 days before that. And the first person I wanted to call that day was my dad.
Was your dad, yeah.
So it was a little different for me, but I mean that really hits home when you talk to people and say, what did you want to do now? Okay, now imagine that your loved one was in the area where whatever the disaster was. It could just be a tornado, it could be a flood. You want to know they're okay, and that's where that app really comes in. Now you look, okay, I know they're okay. I can't talk to them for whatever reason, but at least I know they're okay. And that's a huge relief for people.
And Mark, we actually had a guest on, was it 2 weeks ago, Arnold, when we had Brigadier General David Turner on. He was actually in the Pentagon at the moment
when it was attacked.
And he actually saved the life of his superior. Basically, by making the guy get up and get out of the way. Like, okay, we need to get out of here. And it's like exactly where he was where the plane came in. So he was, recognized for saving the life. But imagine what his family must have thought, knowing that he's there in the Pentagon and the Pentagon has been hit. That must have been an awful, frantic time.
Oh, absolutely.
You're listening to In Tune with Arnold Stricker and Ellie Wharton, KWRH LP 92.9 FM. We're talking to Mark Diedrich, the Director of the Office of Emergency Management for St. Louis County. Mark, now you talked about these 3 kits in food, water, clothing. What about just basic other kinds of communication? I know we rely on, I'm holding up a phone, folks. You can't see this. It's nothing up my sleeve, presto. But we really rely on phones to communicate. And there may be a disaster that happens where these things they don't do anything except be a paperweight.
That's true. And we've also found that quite often the cell towers will be overwhelmed and you can't make a phone call. But remarkably enough, you can text.
Text, correct.
And that was very evident in Katrina. A lot of people were able to text their information. So that's one way you can communicate. We also really, we talked about it already, but having a battery-operated radio so that you can hear local media and know what's going on, having a battery-operated weather radio. We call those weather radios, but we will also use them to push other information out, not just the weather. But if, for instance, we had to do an evacuation for some reason, we would use that along with local media to get that information out, where you need to go, where shelters are, those sorts of things.
Now, you probably won't get into specifics about how much food and how much water. People like, I need, 50 gallons of water. There's people that say you need so much gallons of water for an individual and multiply that out by your family, and that's what you should always have stored. Or food that's not necessarily in the freezer, but it's something that's non-perishable that can sustain you over the time. Some kind of if it's in the winter, something that will keep you warm. If it's in the summer, something that will keep you cool. All those kinds of things. Are those, I don't want to say valid, but how much weight should somebody put on those things?
Absolutely. As far as water goes, it's 3 gallons per person per day. So that's a lot of water that you need to have stored. I will tell you the best way to get to that point is to not go out and buy 3 gallons of water for each day you think you're going to need it for every person in your family at one time. Start small. Buy an extra case of water, or if you don't buy water, just buy a case of water every time you go shopping. At some point, you will get enough water stored for, I like to say, 96 hours. Generally, in most national preparedness, the national preparedness information, they generally go with 72 hours. That's okay. I just like to give you a little bit more. I'd like to have a little cushion there. So plan on 96 hours. Build up that water supply slowly over time. I don't expect anybody to go out and buy, a pallet of water and put it in their basement. The other thing that I tell people about water is, first of all, water has an expiration date on the package. Water doesn't go bad. It'll start to taste funny, but it's not bad for you. It's not going to hurt you. But what I always tell people is start rotating that water. Once you get to the point where you have enough, now start taking the oldest and using it, and just continue to replenish that so you always have that water supply. As far as food, you're absolutely right. A non-perishable type food. But here's the big caveat on food. Do not get food that you don't normally eat. And here's what I mean by that. If you think, okay, canned sardines, yeah, that'll last forever, so I'm going to buy a stockpile of canned sardines, and you don't normally eat canned sardines, you're probably not going to want to eat it. And I know people always tell me, well, if I get hungry enough, I will.
Yeah, then you really need the water.
Yeah,
That's right.
And also your body, if you're not used to eating that food, your body's not going to process it as well as it probably should, if I can be as...
So in other words, what you're saying is if you eat the wrong thing that you're not used to, you better have an extra roll of Scott's tissue with you.
Well, and I'm going to let him finish this, but that becomes another thing is, how do you deal with human waste in a disaster situation where if there was an earthquake and pipes have been broken, et cetera, like that. But, we'll get there in a minute. I want you to finish your train of thought there.
Well, absolutely. We, you're eating food that you're not used to eating. You're going to, and you're in a stressful situation. So your body's going to process that incorrectly, I'll say, and you're going to have another problem that you're going to have to deal with. And as far as dealing with things like waste, if your pipes are broken, let me just start with if the pipes are not broken, but you just don't have water, that's also another use that you can use that bottled water for, that maybe the older stuff. You can use that to flush the toilet. If the pipes are broken, obviously you don't have time to go into detail now, but there's information. You can Google it, or we have some links even on our website to teach you how to make a latrine in your yard and do that safely so that you don't spread disease, because that is another problem that we have to deal with in a major disaster.
Yeah, that's something I think people don't really think through. They think, oh, yeah, I've got the food, the water, I've got the clothing, but oh my gosh, and it's going to be, different for different sexes. And how that stuff's taken care of, and you just can't. Well, I got a shovel. It just doesn't work that way.
People with small children,
right?
Absolutely.
Where maybe you're dealing with diapers, things like that.
Yes.
That again become very difficult to dispose of. And you don't want those things just piling up, because then as things dry out, you're going to end up with worms and flies and things, which then becomes another issue.
Absolutely.
Another health issue.
And I was just going to say, we work very closely with the health department. They're part of any emergency operation that we have to work on issues just like that.
Yeah,
Yes.
I could see that could be an issue.
Yeah, this is something I think that periodically we need to have you back and talk about, because preparing for, most people think disaster, they think the earthquake thing, but there are some small kinds of situations, like we mentioned the household chemical emergencies. Most people know not to mix a couple different household products together or even store them near each other, because that can create an issue. But, taking some precautions, following the instructions that are on things, so you don't have these kinds of incidents that happen and create a hazard around in your house or for your family.
Absolutely. A really good example of this is mixing bleach and ammonia. People are cleaning, and sometimes absent-mindedly, and I'll go ahead and just say this: men are not the best at reading directions. We just have a tendency not to do that. I know it's you probably never heard that before.
No, I've certainly never experienced it.
So
Arnold.
you may get a guy who's going to do some cleaning, and he's going to make his wife happy because he's going to clean the kitchen for the first time in 30 years. And if bleach is good and ammonia is good, well, they got to be good if you mix them together, right? Well, no, that causes a problem, and it's not a widespread problem, but that does happen from time to time, and sometimes just absentmindedly mixing it, or the bottles aren't labeled correctly. Those things are very, very important. How you store your chemicals in your garage or wherever you store your chemicals. Are they on a shelf? And we're talking about a hazard of earthquakes here. What happens if that earthquake hits and these things fall off and spill? So
we didn't talk about medicines either. If people are dependent upon certain types of medications, that they have either that in their kits, and that they're rotating that because that medication does have an expiration.
Absolutely. Rotate that. Another real good idea is to have a copy of your prescription in your kit. Have a copy of any type of important papers, whether it be a passport, driver's license, birth certificate. That's all going to be important in a disaster.
Medical conditions, things like
Absolutely.
that. This is great, Mark. We need to have you back sometime down the road and kind of not rehash some things, but really investigate some areas a little bit more detail, getting some feedback from the community. And hopefully there won't be any things that occur that you guys are going to have to evaluate. But if between the next time you're back there has been a situation, we'd really like to know how you have changed some things and what you've done to really help. And I really appreciate the job that you and the staff and all of the first responders are doing to help keep us safe in these kinds of disasters and emergencies. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you very much, and I'd be happy to come back anytime.
Mark, thanks very much for coming on Intune. Ellie, what a very interesting discussion about things that we really don't think about until something happens. And then we're like, wow, I should have done something like that, or where are the people to help me? And a lot of it begins with each individual, and then each individual family doing their part, being a little bit more prepared, and then you don't have this massive dependence upon another agency to assist you along the way.
That is very true. And I would probably say one thing you all tell people when they do hear the siren and the alarm, they need to go and get to a safe place immediately.
Absolutely. Go inside and find out what's going on.
Good advice.
Well, we're glad that you joined us on Intune today, and we hope that the things that we've talked about have spurred some discussion and some thought and some reflection on your part to help not only yourself, but your family be prepared for what's going on. Don't forget, when the Martians invade, there's only one race, the human race, and every one of us have different characteristics and is uniquely valuable. This is KWRH LP 92.9 FM. For Intune Studio Manager Chris Verdesi, co-host Ellie Wharton, I'm Arnold Stricker. Thank you for joining us today. Until next time, walk worthy and let your light shine.